Is your art getting boring and repetitive? Are you hankering for something new and experimental to punch up your paintings and give them a whole new look? Then this video is for you. Hi, my name is Srish, and today on Srish Creates, we're getting experimental. Today we're going to take a look at an older painting that you may have lying around that you think is quite boring or just too much like all your other paintings, and we're going to use some very simple techniques to see if we can get something new and exciting out of it. I'm going to be painting on Critter, and I am going to be painting a whole new piece with you guys, but feel free to grab any old painting you have lying around that you feel like could use a little extra love, and we're going to apply 3 finishing steps to see if we can get something truly magical out of it. Today we're going to work on the second piece in our Zodiac expansion series, and today we're going to take a look at the darker side of fire, and I'm really excited to see how we can go about getting the most out of it. If you're excited to experiment with me today, make sure you let me know by giving this video a big thumbs up. Comment below how you finish up your paintings and what punch-up details you apply to your work, and subscribe to my channel for way more art content coming your way. Alrighty, here's 3 techniques that you can use to really punch up your paintings. Okay, you've probably used photo textures in your work before, but have you ever used it in weird and wacky ways? So this is something I've really been enjoying, and you probably saw me do this last week. We're going to grab some photos, and instead of using them to create realistic textures, we're going to use them to populate the background with some abstraction. As you can see here, I've pasted in some photos of just the most far removed thing I can think of to fire, which is the faces of some old buildings. Lately, I've really been enjoying old-timey, extravagant cathedrals because they have all these intricate shapes and details that you wouldn't really think to add in manually. You want to resize, skew, rotate, just transform these images until it kind of looks like it could be an interesting shape somewhere, and here is where digital art shines. You're going to change the blending mode of the image layer until it gives you a bunch of texture, but without looking like the actual photo itself. The ones I usually go for are addition, color dodge, soft light, hard light, or overlay. Any of these blending modes will give you interesting effects depending on how subtle or dramatic you want the texture. Then I like to create a transparency mask for the texture layer and paint the whole thing black to make it disappear. And then with an airbrush and a white color selected, I'm gently going to reveal that texture again, only in the areas where I really want it to show through. I just duplicated that first texture and moved it to the bottom right corner as well, rotated it and revealed just the tiniest bit of it. The point is to make it so subtle and abstract that it adds interesting shapes, but without interfering with the composition as a whole, and more importantly, without really looking too much like the object it actually is in the photo. Oh, also, all the photos I use are always stock images from Unsplash. Even though they're heavily altered and almost unrecognizable, it's just good manners to not steal copyrighted art. Next, I grabbed this image of this gothic archway with a little bridge in it because it felt like some really pretty shape language. Again, rotate and rescale and reposition, change up the blending mode, mask out, and then paint back in. Using a transparency mask just gives you more control over the visibility of the layer. It's a non-destructive way of working because you're not actually erasing pixels off the layer itself. With a mask, if you erase too much of it out, you can always bring it right back. I also really like to change up the colors sometimes just to really make the textures unrecognizable. I mean, clearly my style is not minimalist, so hey, let's take it another step further. Okay, this is a little cheat that I love for when my color palette is looking a little too simplistic or just when I want to add a bit of magic to my piece. I grab a rainbow brush and just randomly paint around the light source. I then set the blending mode to color and used a blender brush to smudge out the little blocks. Now, the rainbow brush is from my own brush pack. There's like 3 rainbow brushes in there. You can grab the entire kit up in the cards, by the way, but it's super easy to make yourself as well. It's just a flat rectangle brush, but you set the hue to vary with distance. So the longer you paint with it, the more the color changes. You can adjust the stamp distance to make it smoother or blockier. There's a bunch of ways you can play with this brush, but at its core, it's just a flat brush where the hue varies with distance. The great thing about throwing this in is that it adds a prismatic effect to your lighting. Best place to put it is at the transitions between your highlights and midtones, because that's kind of where the light starts to go wonky and interact more with the surface of your object or the density of the air and such. In this painting, where this bright light exploding from her belly is bouncing off the snake and then heading towards a rounding at her lower belly and such, the perfect place to place all of those rainbow colors is right around the edges where that white light ends. And then, just because I'm extra and never know when to stop, I also pull those colors out into some of those rays. Again, the blending mode is color, meaning it won't change the value of anything, it'll just hue shift the colors underneath. For me, this step really saved this painting because before this, everything was either orangey yellow or bluey purple. Like the rainbow brush really added a ton more nuance and color interest to the piece, but because we've used it consciously, it's not going to overwhelm the overall palette at all. Another great way to use your rainbows in your work is through gradient maps, but again, in a very specific way. I did a video about this ages ago about using holographic gradient maps, and it was actually really incredibly cool. I'll link that video up here, mostly so I can go back and watch it as well, because I really want to refresh that skill. For now though, let's get into the final step, arguably the easiest of them all, that really punches up a painting. Okay, so you've likely used gradients in your work before, but there's way more you can do with gradients than just add color transitions. One great use of a gradient is to add a bit of vignette to your work. With this painting, I feel like the outermost edges were a little too dark. It was a solid contrast to all the brightness in the middle, but not in like a harmonious, well thought out way. It just felt very forced and brutal. So I grabbed like a gray tone and created a radial gradient so that it went from transparent in the middle of the canvas to opaque on the outer edges. I set the layer to screen blending mode, meaning it'll lighten everything underneath, but it was a little too visible in the center as well, which was already very bright. So I added a transparency mask to this vignette layer, and then with a black, I actually used another radial gradient again, this time such that it started with black in the middle of the mask and then gradated to white outside. Everything that's black on a mask disappears from the layer and everything that's white remains visible. So that means the outer edges, which were white on the mask, would stay the same in the vignette, but the center of that layer would gradually disappear. It worked great. Now, another way to use gradients is for when you want to add a blur to your piece, but in a more controlled way. So here, I wanted to add some blurring to the same areas we just vignetted and keep the center sharp. So what I did was duplicate the painting and blurred the entire copy. Then, just as we did with the first vignette layer just now, I created a transparency mask, and with a radial gradient, I made it so the center was black and the outer edges stayed white. So this blur layer disappears from the center where the mask is black and then gradually becomes visible until it's fully visible at the outer edges where the mask is white. It's a great way to add a sort of radial / field blur effect and play with the focal depth to add more interest to the piece. I then added a third gradient, this time to balance the colors out. Because everything in the center is so saturated and overwhelmingly warm, I added a deep blue radial gradient exactly like we saw with the vignette and the blur. Opacity around the outer edges, transparency in the center. I also logged transparency and painted some parts of it green just to break up that blue. Always remember, adding nuance is the key to making it so that your art doesn't look super digital or computer generated. After a bit of refinement, I actually ended up going in and adding more photo textures. These are basically the ceilings of some cathedrals. I fell in love with like the ornamental frame bits and the clouds in the art, and it just seemed like it would fill out the bottom of the piece nicely, and it did. So I wanted to tell you guys a little more about this painting. It represents the dark side of fire energy. Historically, fire has been associated with wisdom, light, and purification. But when untamed, fire can also be destructive, raging, and all-consuming. It is the death before the rebirth, the inferno that precedes the resurrection. When fire rages, it brings calamity. But sometimes we need rage in order to destroy structures that keep us constricted. We need ruin in order to dismantle social, political, and economic constructs that do not serve the collective. Fire drives marches and protests. It drives the loud voices that simply will not be drowned out by sirens or oppression. And today, this message is more relevant than ever. Fire teaches us that when flames spread, when destruction is at your door, renewal is soon to follow. Hand to heart, if I could feasibly use that rainbow holographic effect for every single painting, I fully would. In fact, I just might. But which of these techniques did you find most helpful? Which of these do you already use? And are there other techniques that you find really help make your art look cool and fun and experimental? Comment below so we can all learn from you. Also, this week on the Patreon extended tutorial, we're taking a look at anger, since it seems to be thematic with this painting. We're going to take a look at how to draw anger in subtle and dramatic ways, all the nuance that goes into it, and the full spectrum of anger as an emotion and how you can express it in your paintings. It is going to be a real-time paint-along style tutorial where you can whip out your tablet and draw with me. We chat, we hang out for a bit, and we paint together. So if that's something you're interested in, you can check that post out up here in the card, and I'll link it in the description below. Of course, if you've enjoyed this video and learned something today, let me know by giving it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for way more art content. And if you want to request any videos or just come say hello, you can always check out my social media or my Discord server. All the links are in the description. Again, you can grab this week's extended tutorial and over 75 other real-time extended paint-along style tutorials from my Art and Chill series. These are about 30 minutes to an hour long each, usually around the hour mark. And so if you're not a patron yet, you're really missing out. You can also grab my complete speed paints, my extended brush kit that I made from scratch, as well as occasional prints of my work. So I'll leave a link to my Patreon up here and in the description below. And yeah, come support your girl, it means the whole world to me. Now, if you're looking for tips on how to finish your painting, how to take it from almost there to complete final polish, I actually did a video about this some time ago, so I'll leave that here in the outro. Make sure you check it out, there's a lot to learn. But yeah, that's about it, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Watch that video next, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!